Yes. The gas will start flowing. Only after you puked them.
Singed is a menacing force in the world of Runeterra. He conducts nightmarish operations on the unfortunate population of Zaun, while brokering weapons of mass destruction to the Noxian Legion. He is a sadistic and selfish man who slinks between shadows, and the people affiliated with him only say one thing: don't chase Singed. In the world of Arcane, they attempted to make him more sympathetic, as he committed all these atrocities for the sake of his daughter's survival. Whether it was Silco or Mbessa, he worked under whoever would help him achieve his goal the fastest. One of my favorite depictions of Singed is in the story called The Host by Amanda Jeffrey. Despite this being a short story underneath the Singed universe page, this story does not come from his point of view. The story follows two people noted as the Thinker and the Breaker. To recap this story, the Thinker wakes up in agony. He feels as though someone filled the open cavity of his chest with teeth. He stares through watered eyes in pain and fear, knowing that there is nobody to come look for him, and that his fate is entirely in the hands of Dr. Singed. He is urged to latch onto the Breaker and use their combined biology to accomplish tasks. Eventually, when pushed to his breaking point, he finally does it, merging with the Breaker in order to flee the laboratory. Once escaped, the pair search for their previous home through distorted memories and disgusted onlookers before being stopped by Singed once more. Their futile escape was only another phase in Singed's greater experiment. They chase the Doctor in a blind rage, but hardly even notice the cloud of toxic gas that was left behind. Stumbling to the ground, Singed appears one last time to note how this experiment performed better than the last. Throughout this story, Singed is just out of reach. Even when he is addressing the creatures, he speaks through a recorder, taking notes of how they act and how they answer questions. When he is actually confronted, he just disappears down alleyways, using his various chemicals to ensnare and subdue the creature without ever actually fighting. Though these interpretations of League's mad scientist are slightly different, there is nothing more contrasting than Singed in League of Legends. This is Singed. He is this 18-polygon bald alchemist who just runs around and poisons the entire enemy team while injecting himself with his madness potion. This is obviously nothing like the Singed of canon. Though people have proposed to rework Singed to better match the lore, it would be an impossible feat. How could somebody whose whole deal is quietly operating in the background while chaos unfolds fit into a playstyle so reckless and loud? And my solution's simple. We just remove him entirely. The biggest problem with reworking Singed is the fact that his gameplay is iconic. If Riot did in fact change his kit, it would erase the special impact that Singed had on the game. While yes, he can be very frustrating to fight in lane, and his cowardly playstyle sparks rage in thousands of League players, it's just one of those things that would feel empty if it was taken out of League for better or for worse. And like I mentioned before, Singed doesn't do the fighting himself in almost every interpretation in the League canon. He's a manipulator who prefers to work in the background while others accomplish his vision. While this type of character is not foreign to League's roster, considering we have LeBlanc of the Black Rose and Renatta Glasc walking around in broad daylight killing people, it's especially hard to imagine Singed in a similar fashion because he's just a regular dude. He's not an immortal wizard who has access to an array of magical abilities, nor is he robotically enhanced. If anything, him being a normal guy adds to his particular sense of horror, and this is why he shouldn't even be playable. To replace in-game Singed, there are two different paths that this rework can go down, each with their own interpretation of how Singed's canonical influence can still impact the game directly. Number 1. The Experiment. Taking a leaf out of the host's book, we can have the center of Singed's gameplay revolve around one of his experiments instead, while Singed himself can move in silence. This potential rework would replace Singed with one of his own creations, perhaps a Chemtech-boosted berserker who Singed speaks through from speakers. When he gets a kill, Singed praises him, and when he dies, a new one takes its place. Singed could say test number 2, for example, where each time the creature dies, that number would increase, with Singed eventually turning to scolding the creature when the deaths are too many. Much like the Outlast trials, the player and Singed would adopt a relationship similar to that of the Reagent and Dr. Easterman, where to Singed, this battlefield is merely a trial for one of his next creations. He would feign affection towards this creature when it does good, and grow colder when it underperforms. This potential rework would be really good at maintaining that menacing presence that Singed has. He has no time to fight in the front lines of these stupid wars, so he sends his endless supply of experiments to wipe out his enemies for him. Additionally, a Chemtech Berserker would be a really close match with Singed's existing gameplay, where it runs around hopped up on chemicals and wreaks havoc in its wake. However, this rework runs into a very big problem. We already have like 5 of Singed's creations in the game already. And while each of these characters are different enough from each other, I feel like taking this route would involve walking a very fine line. Even if it was done tastefully, it would still feel as if we just added a second Mundo or a second Warwick to this game. Because, stop me when you've heard this before, some random Zaunite of varying social status is kidnapped one day. They shift between blurry memories of labs and scalpels before suddenly realizing that they have become a monster, with almost no recollection of who they once were. Now that they are freed, they are haunted by their past and the operation that was done to them. They lash out violently at whoever pursues them, and now they live amongst the Zaun Undercity. Oh, what's that? I could have stopped after they got kidnapped and experimented on? Right. And unfortunately, that's just how a lot of these Zaunite monster champions end up. With the exception of Zac, the monsters of Zaun were created by experiments that tie back to Singed in some capacity, even if it's loosely alluded to, because yes, I know what you're thinking. Oh, Mundo wasn't made by Singed, and to that I say, not only was the origin of Mundo left purposely vague, but he injects himself with what's basically Shimmer to revitalize himself. Mundo's entire backstory has Singed written all over it without ever actually saying it. But saving Mundo for a different video, this really is just a way to say that monster champions are becoming a tired archetype in League. The developers said so themselves. Now, designing a monster to haunt the Zaun Undercity without tying it to some sort of horrific experiment makes that challenge all the more difficult. Should this be the route they take for redesigning Singed, it would feel boring. It would feel like an easy way out. Oh, we couldn't figure out what to do with Singed, so we replaced him with insert boring monster trope that Singed controls remotely. But when it comes down to it, what is there to do with in-game Singed? But this is where I propose the second route, option 2. The Fanatic. We could still very well have Singed in the game, or at least someone so far gone that they have a twisted obsession with the Doctor and attempt to mimic him wherever they can, fully devoting themselves to his dark experiments. This character will get jealous of Oriana and the other creations. They can easily break into a maddened frenzy fueled by an urge to please their idol. A character like Amanda Young, the Pig, Vanny, or Harley Quinn are excellent examples of this trope that I don't think's fully represented by anyone in League's roster. This would be the second option for Singed's rework. As seen on the screen, I drew multiple interpretations of this character. The one on the left would be a man trying to make himself look like Singed. He severely burned his jaw in chemicals and presumably gouged out his eye while removing the majority of his hair. He carries around a plush of Rio and a large scalpel. He would also attempt to dress like Singed with both the long coat and the scarf around his neck. This interpretation would be the least alienating to Singed's existing player base. On all accounts, the character looks like Singed, plays like Singed, but just ultimately isn't. When he talks to the other champions, he could probably also try to find something that Singed would say to them, but just end up sounding like a twisted parody. And then we have the female Singed fanatic. While this character wouldn't necessarily pretend to be Singed, all of her motivation revolves around praising him and following in his footsteps, much like that Harley Quinn and Amanda Young type that I briefly mentioned before. Though making Singed into a mentally ill baddie might alienate some fans of the character, I still think it would be a viable option for Singed's rework. For either gender, we could have Singed himself appear at the edge of their vision, dissipating when they attempt to move in closer. Additionally, we could have the voice of Singed echo in their heads, and have this character talk to themselves as they walk around the rift. While not as imposing as the Chemtech Berserker, I still think the playstyle fits with their narrative. They want to spread the influence of Singed to anybody they can afflict without caring about running headfirst into battle. The problem with this design would be the fact that Singed is completely removed from the game, whereas with the Chemtech Berserker route, Singed would at least still be able to speak and interact with the champions through his creation. Having Singed's kit slapped onto some psychotic bruiser who poisons people who just so happens to love Dr. Singed would feel disingenuous to the character. Sure, the fanatic represents Singed's influence in the worst way possible, it just isn't reflective of him the way that the first route is. So when it comes down to these two options, which one do I like more? The fanatic offers a broken mirror back at Singed. It takes all the atrocities done throughout his lore and shows us that there are people inspired by his work. However, Singed himself would be so far removed, it's almost like he was deleted entirely. The experiment, on the other hand, allows Singed to be represented in his own unique way. Singed still speaks and interacts through this creature, and its faultless obedience to Singed's orders make it less like a Warwick or Mundo, and more like a robotic sleeper soldier, which is another archetype League doesn't have. Between the two, I have to say that the experiment would be a better way to handle the rework. Even though a handful of other experiments exist in this game, I feel like this Chemtech soldier would be distinct enough as is, despite having a similar backstory. Additionally, keeping Singed somewhat tied to the character is important for the rework, and I feel like making Singed into a mania-induced hallucination wouldn't be as impactful as someone telling the cybernetic zombie to just run forward and take down however many as he can. Plus, you gotta admit, the Chemtech Berserkers from Arcane, way too sick to not be put in League in some capacity. The way they moved and relentlessly attacked in the show really mirrored that frantic playstyle that Singed had in my head, and I think that's where I got the idea from. For an updated version of Singed's E, the experiment can stab forward with those sick-ass swords to impale whoever's in front of him before flinging them back to their team. The R could easily just be an overdrive mode for the Chemtech implants, as it pulses and maybe changes color. The creature would grow faster, more resistant, and more lethal. Basically just the normal Singed ult that we have already. And maybe for the W, a Singed outside of vision hurls a flask on a zone that grounds all enemies within it, alluding to the fact that he is always present. Building off of this, there is actually a third way to rework Singed. We keep him in the game. While maintaining everything I said about the experiment, we can have both Doctor and Creation in the Rift side by side as League's first true puppet character. Singed would be the one responsible for the immobilization and crowd control, while the soldier rushes forward and deals damage. Almost as if one's the thinker and one's the breaker. Obviously, killing either of the pair will result in a death. Either Singed walks into the shadows once his robot perishes, or the Chemtech soldier falls apart when the Doctor is eliminated. Pressing Q, Singed steps aside, becoming untargetable. Gas leaks from the experiment as it regains autonomy and can run around with a separate kit for a brief duration. When it's over, it shuts back down, entering an untargetable state while remaining motionless where it last stood. This would be when the player regains control of Singed himself. In either form, the other will follow behind once the other has traveled a certain distance away. The remainder of Singed's kit would involve tossing the glue trap with his W and commanding the soldier to trample in the direction, displacing all in its path and invoking a Dota-esque micro-stun on whoever is in the way. As for the experiment, it will have Singed's flip, and for the remaining ability, I don't know. The more I talk about this kit, the more bullshit it sounds. Listen, I'm just someone who peaked silver, but you gotta admit, having Singed and his daughter share a playstyle would be the most poetic thing in League of Legends. Either way, something needs to happen to Singed. Who he is in the game is so different from who he is in the story, and his playstyle is too iconic to completely remove. Whether Riot retcons their story for this character a third time, or completely butchers his gameplay, I still think it would be easier to completely remove him from the playable roster and allow his kit to be represented by something that fully embraces his influence in the story. I hope you liked the video. This is my first time trying something like this, and I intend to make more video essay adjacent content in the future, alongside some of my friends who might also post on this channel here and there. This was Carter from the Breville channel. Hope you stay tuned.